So first of all, we're going to have everyone introduce themselves. What is your role and what is your personal stake in cloud native application security? Why don't we start with you?
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Dan. I'm running in Romania the National Cybersecurity Directorate, which is a brand new civilian agency. We are the regulator for cloud security in that country. So that's a lot of skin at stake.
Okay. Ger?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. My name is Gering Hedesvik. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Vue Group, which is the largest public transport operator in Norway. And we also have a presence in Sweden.
And hey everyone, my name is Anne Hännikäinen, and at the moment I'm Global Head of Information Security and Data Privacy in Inter-IKEA Group. However, I don't present IKEA here. I'm very new to IKEA, so I'm a person with experience implementing cloud in different kind of environments, especially part of the digitalization, like transformation.
And my name is Eric Gold, and I am responsible for evangelizing the new religion of agentless cloud security for cloud native applications at Orca Security. I think we'll start with Anne now for the next question, which is what is the major difference between cloud native application security and physical data center application security?
Well, naturally, what is always a challenge that when you start, like, there comes the question that, hey, we need to go to cloud. It is cost efficient and we get scalability, and then someone doesn't realize how you need to do that. You really need to do it in a native way. You need to really you cannot just lift and shift your existing environment on top of, for example, AWS, and then like think that you will get the cost effectiveness and scalability and so on. So that's the first mistake. They forget to invest money to create again your solution in native way using the native tools provided by the cloud providers that they provide to you. So you don't have your old database anymore, then you will build it on top of RDS, for example, and so on. So this I've seen too often, that the investments has been missing, and the realization that you need to have also money to build as native by default.
And Ger, what's your opinion on that?
I think the major difference is that in my data center, I pick and choose the tools available to me myself. I'm also responsible for each and every one of them, while in a cloud environment, that responsibility is shared with the cloud vendor. Depending on what type of delivery model for that cloud we are buying, you're talking about, if it's an infrastructure platform or a software as a service. We also have a different set of control planes, and the elements that we can see and do something about is very dependent on the service we're buying.
And Dan, what's your opinion on the difference between cloud native, cloud application security and physical data center application security?
So for cloud ones, what we see in practice, a lot more complicated to understand basically what you have there.
Yes.
Much easier to deploy. You get a lot of, let's say, fast increasing maturity compared with the traditional data centers and so on. Also because you rely on super cool, fancy, hype new solutions. But it's getting very, very complicated to understand a bit, to have more visibility, to understand what is there in terms of applications, in terms of workload, basically what you have at hand. And on one hand, you can deploy it fast, you can scale it up fast. On the other hand, it's a lot more tough and more difficult to build the knowledge actually you need in order to do that.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. And well, what we've heard at Orca from customers, like our largest customer, SAP, is that one problem with cloud security is that when you're treating cloud native applications the same way as physical data center applications, you don't realize that the cloud itself is a super application. And there's ways to take advantage of the cloud architectures to secure your entire cloud environment holistically rather than securing each individual virtual asset within the cloud. As a next question, we'll start with Geir. And what is the biggest potential risk for cloud native applications, and how can that risk be addressed?
Well, that's a tough question. I'd say that what the biggest risk is a bit dependent, but I think the biggest potential risk is mismanagement of configuration of the actual application itself. I think, and I think how you address it is that you have a pretty well thought through deployment process where you test and verify your configuration and then be ready to correct it if you find anything that is wrong.
Dan?
Totally agree. Misconfiguration is by far the highest risk, and it's getting actually not that easy to test, and get the correct results. Or there is also a risk to test, but completely misinterpret the outcome of those tests. I've seen some horror stories in Romania regarding this.
And biggest risk of cloud native applications?
Well, of course, if you don't have enough visibility to your environment and the tools which would be providing the visibility to you, and especially taking into consideration how creative our dear developers are, they find fancy things. And the thing is also that you actually might end up to an environment, you do have like every possible coding language used, and different kind of open source applications, libraries, and so on used. How do you actually gain visibility to all of these environments, plus the vulnerabilities, not to mention about the zero-day ones?
What I've heard from my customers about the biggest risk is actually the gaps in coverage. Because especially if you're using security tools that are designed for physical data centers that require you to install a policeman on each asset, with the proliferation of cloud assets, how they can increase and decrease dynamically, it's simply impossible to have an agent or a sidecar on agent on every VM or a sidecar on every container. And so you really have to have a mechanism to see the entire cloud account and all the assets in there without having gaps in coverage. As a next question, and for this one we'll start with Dan, why is there such strong interest in addressing context when assessing security risks for cloud native applications?
Now I have to put my regulatory hat. Definitely it's a lot of regulation behind it. Everything that is cloud related gets really a lot of attention from the regulators, from governments, all in all. Simply because it's becoming critical, simply because the number of, let me put it like that, third-party attacks on cloud and cloud assets increased like 6-fold in the last 2 years. So it's a lot of focus from this angle. Of course, you will see probably in the coming weeks that makes it very tough for this business, because security requirements will go up. Everything related to reporting of incidents, not necessarily security incidents, but incidents as a whole for cloud will become mandatory with penalties attached, etc., and will be required a lot more visibility on the tools, the technologies, all those configuration aspects, privileges and stuff like that for the cloud.
Thanks, Dan. Anne, what about you? Why is everybody so, why is context the buzzword nowadays?
Yeah, because that's the only thing what matters. Because of course, like CVS scores are good. They give an indication that this might be a bad thing. But the thing is also that when you start to check it out, like do you have that technology? Do you have that vulnerability? How did you set up that environment? Is that really that serious as the score is telling you? Because it's based on the context and what kind of a business data you do have. Is this important for you? So it's a combo of different kind of aspects, like starting from the IP addresses and devices, technology, libraries, and there might be also several vulnerabilities which together are actually causing a bigger issue for you than this one looks like serious vulnerability.
And Gare, why is everyone talking about context when looking at cloud-native application security risks?
Well, I think it's the same reason they talk about context in many other security areas. It's because you need to know what you're actually securing and from what, and also what relations you have in terms of supply chain, vendors, and other stakeholders to the actual deployment of your application. So, and that way you can see what is the normal and what is abnormal behavior, and that's what we're trying to spot, is the abnormalities, and then do something about those.
Thanks, Gare. What I've heard from the customers that I've worked with using Orca is that the reason they're concerned with context is because they don't just want to give lists of risks. They want to be able to decide what to work on first. You might have 10,000 vulnerabilities, but if only 2 of them are in actual attack paths that can get to some sort of treasure in your organization, then you don't need to fix the 10,000 vulnerabilities. Focus on the 2 first, and you can only prioritize if you have contextual analysis. As a next question, and for this one, we'll start again with Anne. How do we increase cybersecurity visibility across the entire software development cycle for cloud applications, and in fact, see everything in order to secure it?
Very good question, because as mentioned earlier, if you do have very challenging environment, you actually might have 3 different cloud providers, you might have hundreds of different kind of accounts, and then you would still need to have like the visibility until the software, and then like the coding language used and so on. Are the tools, then is the technology helping you here? Yeah, quite probably partly, but like is one tool helping you? Perhaps not. So it could be also like you need to think in architectural point of view also, that like make it like a bit simplified and have a strong architectural leadership to ensure you don't have like all possible things from the world developed just because some supplier, for example, just happened to have resource who just happened to know only this coding language. So really like try to also like streamline your own environment, because like as previous presentation here, they really streamline the environment in good way.
And Gare, how do we increase visibility across all the cloud applications?
Yeah,
Security visibility.
I think it depends a bit on what you put into the term, invisibility. We want security to be visible in all parts of our software development cycle. Doesn't mean that I see it all the time, but I want to see the patterns and know that what they are, and I want to see the things that doesn't fit into the patterns, so that we can find the breaches and do something about those, which require our security expertise. But developing secure software requires developers, not security people necessarily. So it's in somewhere along those lines where you have a good collaboration, but you need some tasks will be a developer task, even if it's a security task. And we don't really need to see it. We just need to know it's being done.
Thanks, Gare. Dan, how do we increase visibility across cloud-native applications?
I would say by acknowledging and understanding really that this is it's an ecosystem. It's not just a supplier and client kind of relation, and really everyone has a role. From let's say the client that has the obligation to do proper configuration management, to train its own people and users, to the software developer for the app, to the technology provider, to, I don't know, whoever hosts as a service, whatever, in the cloud. So the moment we understand we are going to get rid of the problems and the security issues in general, when each of those actors play its role, gets the right maturity, works with standards and frameworks, and communicates across the line, then we are going to be better.
Thanks, Dan. You guys actually hit everything so well. I would just add, thinking of the cloud not as a bunch of individual assets that you have running in the cloud, but thinking of it holistically as an interconnected system of assets, so you can secure the cloud itself rather than each individual asset. As a final question, there's a challenge for you guys. I want you to try to answer this because we only have about 1.5 minutes left, in about 1 sentence or maybe 2 sentences. And the question is, what is the major cause of friction between security operations teams and DevOps teams or development teams when it comes to implementing security? Choose your words carefully. And we will start. Who wants to go first? How about that as a volunteer? Yeah, go for it.
I think the biggest friction between security and DevOps teams is DevOps teams' idea about security requirements being non-negotiable in that sense that their first impressions of what it entails is the right one, and it's not something they can talk to us about.
Anne?
Automation level. So you push everything as much as possible, for example, to AWS, Google, and so on, like in the area they are responsible for. They do have talent that your developers can concentrate developing. And then there it's possible to take into consideration also security and privacy aspects.
Thanks, Anne. Dan?
So honestly, sometimes those teams, they don't speak the same language. They talk next to each other, not to each other. And honestly, most of the cases I've seen come simply because they have separate reporting lines. So they simply report to different people.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, my answer, the major cause of friction is that it is absolute madness to be asking favors of the people that you are auditing in order to audit them. It is madness that security teams have to ask favors from DevOps teams to implement security controls within the environment. What we need is a mechanism where you can secure and monitor your cloud environment without the permission of the development teams, the DevOps teams, the companies that you're acquiring. There has to be technology that allows you to just point in an agentless fashion at your cloud environment and to see all the risks without needing to implement software in the environment. We just crammed all that into 20 minutes. Thank you all very much for joining us today for this discussion.